Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, Aron Ra.
How you do?
And please tell the audience, what beverage do you have tonight?
Well, this is a local brew. I don't normally drink out of cans, but unfortunately, this is one of my favorite beers, and this is the only way they sell it. This is a Tupps local brewery, and they have a brand called Full Grown Man, which is a little awkward to ask for at a bar. But this is one of their seasonal ones. This is Full Grown Ombre, which is an imperial stout that also has hot peppers in it.
Seems like a winner. I just can't stay away from Michigan, so I had the Dragon's Milk. And then I have the Founder's Backwoods Bastard, which is a bourbon. They must have thousands of bourbon barrels just sitting in a cave. It's a Scottish ale. Because they have just every 3 months, they have a new version, and it's beautiful.
I have a few bourbon barrel-aged imperial stouts in my fridge right now. One of them is Big Bad Baptist, which is another awkward name.
Yeah, out of Utah, right?
I think so. We've got a couple out of Utah. It would impress me. When I went to Utah last time, I actually brought my own beer because I brought an ice chest full of my own beer because I thought that, they told me that if you go to a bar in Salt Lake City that they would give you 2% or something like that. But what I didn't know was that they had so many microbreweries, and they have some really good stuff in the microbreweries. So I was sorry that I brought my own.
It's kind of your universal thing, and that's what I did the last time I went to Reason Con, as I brought my own. But, a little theirs, a little mine. So we will kind of get kicked off. So for the first time in history, Aron Ra will be taken out of context. This is from Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. Anyone who believes in evolution is a radical feminist, communist, Nazi, racist, drug-abusing, pornographic pervert.
Courtesy Answers in Genesis. That's what Answers in Genesis actually said.
Beautiful. So before we get to the origin story of kind of Aron Ra, the persona that is you, I kind of wanted to know, what was your family's religious background?
Well, it was divided. Half of my family, it seems, were the conservative Mormon type, right down to the magic underwear, and the others were more. They would sometimes call themselves Jack Mormon because they don't know what Mormon is. Well, to be completely fair, they don't know what a creed is. They will identify as Christian, and so they're better than me, but they don't know what a creed is. They've never cracked open a Bible. They don't care what it says. So you may be a drug addicted, alcoholic, fornicator on your fourth marriage, but you're still better than me because you're a Christian. If you even know what that means. that's what gets funny about some of the people in my family when they get religiously indignant about it.
But what happened, or it's always they say to the atheist, what happened to you? But when did you kind of realize that maybe it's not for you?
Well, I never identified as a Mormon myself, although I was raised by a Mormon family predominantly, and I was baptized as a Mormon. So, on the technicality, the church put my name in the roster and wouldn't take it out for many years despite protest. I'm sure my name is off the roster now, that I'm no longer included in the list of Mormons. But for a long time, they were still sending missionaries to my door until they finally sent a half a dozen of them at once to listen to me lecture for an hour and a half, and then I never heard from them again. And I'm not even kidding about that. I had a half a dozen Mormon missionaries in my house for like a 2-hour conversation, and I'm pretty sure I messed a couple of them up. But I didn't identify as a Mormon myself because I thought as a young child, how would I know whether I'm Mormon? How do I know that I meet all the criteria? How do I know that I believe everything required? What is it that Mormons believe that's different than anybody else? And how do I know that I believe all those things? And how do I know that some other religion wouldn't be more in line with what I think? That if I knew the beliefs of other religions, well, how do I know that I wouldn't more align with one of them? And it strikes me as peculiar that I would have this quandary and seemingly nobody else does. Why would you think that, I'm a Southern Baptist from this or that convention because that's what your parents are? How the hell do you even know? How do you know what other conventions think differently, or how do you know that the Baptists versus the Lutherans? What the hell's the difference, really? What categorizes you in one or the other? And how do you know what the Hindus believe? Any sect of Hindu, because the Vaishnavites, the Brahmins, the Bhakti, all of this. How would you know? But people just adopt religion much like they adopt a T-shirt, or they choose a football team. So some people will have, like, everything around their house will be dedicated to the Dallas Cowboys, including the shirts that they're wearing, and they're all about that. And you better not say anything against the Dallas Cowboys. But it doesn't seem to be any more significance than that. It certainly doesn't have any practical application in their lives. To me, it's entirely tribal. So I don't know why other people never questioned this the way that I always did since I was a little kid.
But did you just do research on religions? Did you actually do like a tour? Like, all right, I'm going to check all this out and then come to a decision?
Well, I'll say yes, I did. One of the advantages that I had was when we lived in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, where Mormons own and control quite a lot of everything. And there's places out there where if some of these towns, if you're not a Mormon, you don't have a job. It's that bad. So when we moved from there, from the Four Corners states to Los Angeles, for example, then suddenly we weren't the dominant demographic anymore. And then when people would ask me, what my religion is, I would always say, well, my family is Mormon. And there would be a pregnant comma there. I mean, people would know that there's a comma coming and followed by a but they wouldn't listen for that long. Oh, you're Mormon? Well, you believe all kinds of ridiculous poppycock that, I didn't even know that Mormons believed. So I would want to invite these people. Well, you want to come in and tell my mother that she believes all these things that you just told me? Because I'd say, did you know that Mormons believe? If I identified as a Mormon, which I didn't, but if I had identified as a Mormon, don't you think I would have known what the fuck Mormons believe? And if you think that's what Mormons believe, why don't you come inside and tell my mother that that's what she believes? Because I'm betting that's not what she believes. Just a hunch. But these Southern Baptists and Pentecosts or whatever would never come into my house to face my mom on what to tell her what it is that she believes. Now, grant, Mormons believe a lot of crazy shit. Everybody believes a lot of crazy shit. Every religion. And if you think that you're immune to that, if you think it's just the Hindus that believe in multiple gods and all how strange is that, well, you haven't analyzed your own religion yet, and you don't know what magic spells are, and you don't know that snakes can't talk even if they're magically enchanted. Period. And you don't know the story about Balaam, where the donkey can see the angel with the flaming sword because God's technology is limited to the Bronze Age, and the donkey then talks to him. No. People need to understand that the reason your religion sounds as ridiculous to everybody else as everyone else's religion sounds to you is because they're all equally ridiculous. And it isn't just the Mormons who believe crazy shit. Y'all do.
So what is the story behind your name? First of all, are you a god? I have to ask that question.
When I first started posting online, it was actually on Usenet way back in the day, like when the internet was first released to the public, so to speak, and Usenet was the biggest part of that. I was on all kinds of news groups, starting with Talk.Origins and Alt.Creationism, and I needed a handle. And the amount of research that I had done up to that point, it showed me that Aron Ra was a parallel of Yahweh. That the composite air god and sun god was a parallel of the Judeo-Christian god, which is not really a word, but we'll use it for the moment. Yahweh is most often depicted as a volcano, but is also depicted as an air god and a sun god at some point. And then the volcano, air god, sun god, air god, sun god, and the air god, sun god of Egypt even shared a wife, according to some authorities, were say that Athera or Asherat, the same character name, belonged to both Yahweh and belonged to Amen, which became Aron Ra. And so I saw Amun Ra as a template for the God of Western monotheism, and I wanted to give a nod to that. So as my name is Aron, pronounced such, I said Aron Ra. Okay, and I had no idea when I created that handle in a moment of thought that I would get a certain amount of notoriety from it, or that I would publish a book under that name, or that I would run for public office under that name. And then I just decided that, yeah, that was more my name than the one I was raised with.
Now, during all the time that I've been kind of involved in the atheist community, I've seen a lot of people trying to convert each other. I haven't seen a lot of successes. Now, you had one pretty good success early in your career, Old Earth creationist. Now, who was that, and what did you use to convert her?
For better than 20 years, I've been offering a challenge that I will prove evolution to your satisfaction. I can prove that evolution is the only theory of biodiversity with scientific evidence or support, and that I'll prove it to your satisfaction, such that I can't achieve my goal unless you admit that I have made my point. And the only rule is that this is going to have to be a Socratic method. There's going to have to be a number of questions that I have to ask you to make sure that what your understanding is. And then I have to correct certain errors and then get you to understand when the corrections have made, get you to understand the definitions used. And then you have to achieve a certain level of understanding before we can go on to the next level. But what I always encounter, always, with one exception, is that people will not correct their definitions, even when you show them every source that shows that what Answers in Genesis told you is wrong, what the scientific community is teaching is something else entirely. You know, that these people will start defending their belief to the point that they don't care what the truth is. They will just duck and dodge every question. So my rule is that you cannot repeatedly ignore direct questions. You have to properly address every point or query put to you. And time after time after time, because I've only had, I want to say, a dozen to maybe 15 people that have ever accepted this challenge, and all of them bailed the same way. They all repeatedly ignore direct questions. I will have to repeat 5 or 6 times. I'm like, okay, we're done. If you can't answer the question from your own perspective, give your own defense of your position, we're done. You're just playing a game now. And I'm wondering, if you've repeatedly ignored a direct question, this has got to be in a public venue, by the way. This is never an email. It does me no good to have a private conversation with somebody that I can't show everybody else. It has to be in a public forum where everybody else can see. And preferably one that isn't going to be deleted as soon as I make a good point. Because I've had this debate with somebody once before where he deleted his own blog. And when queried about that, he said that he deleted it himself when he realized that I was making sense. So that doesn't mean that everybody's dishonest. And so in one case, I encountered somebody who believed because they were raised this way, they think that there must be something to it, since everybody they know holds this belief in common. And maybe if you don't understand certain things, maybe other people with expertise in that area could explain it to you so that you could understand it. You know, that happens. And so I got this one person, and we were on christianforums.com, because, you know, I go where the fight is. And I'm arguing with this person, and I say that I can prove to your satisfaction that, you know, that evolution is a real thing, and you will be an evolutionist for the rest of your life after this conversation. And we went through just a few of the incremental steps. You know, the beginning question: do you accept and understand this? Yes. Okay, then we move on. And here's the explanation: do you accept and understand this? Yes. Okay, we move on. And then we didn't get very far into it before she finally said, I get it. I understand what you're saying. And then she starts throwing in her own questions so that I can give further clarification. And they're sincere questions. They're not gotcha questions. They're not dodge questions. They're sincere. She wants to understand the things that she needs to understand in order to accept this. And she went from being a Christian school teacher to a science teacher in a public school within about a year. The other thing about that was that she lived in an area that was so overwhelmingly Christian. I mean, she lived in a place in Texas that had only one meetup group online, and that was the Friends of Mike Huckabee. So, yeah, when she told her employers, which is a Christian school, that she understood now that evolution is an actual thing, and that what she's being required to teach her students is therefore a lie, and that she can't knowingly go in and lie to her students, she was fired. And in short order, she had so many people oppose her just on the idea, just on accepting evolution as a thing. I didn't have to walk her out of Christianity. The Christians did that to her. They reacted so negatively to her accepting evolution that she ended up dropping her religion within a year, just because of the Christian hypocrisy and inability to accept. They want you to be like the Republican voting bloc, where you have to accept everything as a package deal and do exactly what you're told. Whereas, in the rest of the spectrum, everybody has multiple issues that we care about to varying degrees, but it's not like that in this one little collective. But now that she's out of that collective, she's able to analyze things a lot more, and the people that she left behind are not able to analyze at all. So they're stuck in their little box, and she ended up with not a lot of friends left. So she ended up with me, and we were married in a couple of years. So that's when my wife Lalandra, who is now every bit the activist that I am. As a matter of fact, she's largely responsible for me being who I am.
Well, I think you got to give some applause for that. But we can't go through the whole evolution debate without the atheist nightmare. This is my cat's toy. It's actually full of catnip. It's in the shape of a banana if people are listening and not watching. But yeah, that's one of your buddies, Ray Comfort. But continuing kind of the background story. So early on, when you first started doing kind of educational videos, was there a time limit on YouTube videos which made you have to get to the point quickly?
Yeah, I originally was posting on Christian forums, as I said before, and I came up with the realization that all of the arguments that I'm hearing against evolution, I'm hearing the same dozen or so arguments over and over and over again. And these are things that when you show them that they're wrong, they will not correct that error. They will never accept that they're wrong on this point. You'll never get an admission that they're wrong on this point. When they say there's no beneficial mutations, and you show them a whole bunch of them from scientific documentation, from peer-reviewed journals and so forth, they will change the subject. Well, what about transitional species? Okay, well, here's a few hundred transitional species that meet the precise definition that you're talking about, and here's the scientific documentation to back those up. But what about admitting that they were beneficial mutations so that we can move on? But no, you're not going to get an admission, ever. Because these are people that now, they will do whatever they have to preserve the belief. And what I have seen is that it is possible to be an honest creationist, but only when you're at a level of forgivable ignorance. There comes a point when you talk to somebody who knows both sides of this argument better than you know your own alone, where you're going to be forced to make a choice, whether to remain honest or whether to remain creationist, because it will no longer be possible to be both. And I've seen many times when the believer will go the wrong course, where they now know they have to start lying in order to defend their truth. And some of them I've got at least, I would say at least 100 emails. I'm not sure how many over the last 20 years, but at least 100 emails have come in from people telling me that they used to be believers until I made this or that argument and it got them to thinking. And one guy told me that during an argument that I had with him directly online, that I had actually changed his mind in the debate, but he wasn't able to admit that. So he continued the rest of the debate from the perspective of a believer, and that it took him over a year to be able to admit that. And I kind of get that too. When the belief is so deeply ingrained, it's not, especially when you're an adult and you've been raised that way, it's not something that you can walk away from quickly. It takes a child to have a deep-seated belief like that and be able to walk away from it, because they've only had that belief for a year or so, and then they can walk away from it in a moment. But for everybody else, it's quite a long stairway.
Yeah, I almost think of it, I don't know if is it sunken cost fallacy? Like if you buy an expensive beer and you take a sip of it and you're like, oh, this is horrible, but you keep drinking it because you put all this money into it. Think of it in terms of religion, like you're saying with your wife. People leave. They have to sometimes leave their family. They have to leave friendships. They have to leave jobs. There's a lot to that, and it's not just the people who are cashing in on saying things that aren't true, that they know aren't true. There's a lot behind.
There's a lot of payoff for that. So it's not just the people that are making millions upon millions of dollars a year. It's not just those few people, but even the people that aren't making a hell of a lot of money, they're still reaping in a reward, because once you adopt the costume of a religious leader, now suddenly you are considered both wise and moral, and people seek you for advice. Why? Because you now advertise that you believe absolute horseshit for no good reason. Somehow that makes you wise in the eyes of the community. It shouldn't. People should view you as crazy. People should view you as stupid, but that's not how they view the men of the cloth. And this is what I have to be thankful to the Catholic Church for at least turning that down, because when I was a little kid, the Catholic vicar was considered, or the Catholic priest was considered, honorable and noble and everything, simply because he was a priest. And we finally, really, how much did it take? How much did it take for us to finally figure out that's not the case?
In some cases, that's still not the case. And it's like, how many examples, like you said, transitional. It's not like we have 3 transitional examples. You have as many as you can count.
Even by this.
It's like, the Catholic Church and everything that's happened. How many times can you say, la, 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 I can't hear you?
Yeah. And then finally, the Pope. I love this. The Pope recently blamed Satan.
I've heard that. Yeah, it's like, why don't you just flip the script? I think we might know who the good guy is finally.
Exactly.
But I was going to make the joke, so I didn't get to finish Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. I got 94% through on my Kindle. So I know in the next 6%, you do not do a 180 and cash in, because you're clearly still doing what you do. When did you decide to go down that uphill path of, I'm going to be a full-time activist?
Yeah, well, that was a good one. What had disturbed me was that somebody put a chick tract under my windshield wiper. And for those of you who don't know, Jack Chick was an extreme hate monger, religious nut who made up these little comic books, and he's been doing these comic books for decades. The first one I saw was, I was 8 years old, and this would be 1971. And I remember being an 8-year-old and reading this little religious tract that these people had left behind, and thinking that this guy is hateful and stupid, and that this comic book was beneath my intelligence as an 8-year-old. But this is the way that they advertise themselves. And in one case, I remember that one of these chick tracts was actually written by Kent Hovind of Creation Science Evangelism.
Now, have you done an episode of, I think it was the Bible Reloaded, where you covered one of these?
I did. I covered that chick tract and went through everything that was wrong with it. And I had great gratification when the Non Sequitur show pitted me against Kent Hovind, and it was the first time that he and I got to speak directly to each other. And he proved to be no more intelligent than I ever imagined him to be. And he was at least as dishonest as I always knew he was. So that was a really good time to meet him and show that up, so that his own followers on his own Facebook were posting how badly he lost that discussion, and how he clearly didn't know what he was talking about. For his people to say that to him on his Facebook, that was gratifying.
Yeah, I think I heard a debate you did with one recently. It might have been a local thing, Texas thing, where it was like people on opposite sides. And that one did go on and on and on.
Well, I've had a few. I mean,
I feel like he does the bullfighter where he kind of sidesteps a lot.
He does indeed.
And maybe he does the Gish Gallop where he just throws a bunch of stuff at you.
What he wants a standard debate so that he can have 20 minutes to lie 2,000 times. And then I would be remiss to be able to address most of what he said. But knowing that in advance, I refused to allow our discussion to be billed as a debate. I said, I will come on and talk to him, but it's going to be a discussion between he and I, and it's not going to follow the debate format. So he will state in 2 or 3 minutes what his case is. I don't need to state what my case is. He'll state his, and then we'll go to town over what's wrong with it. And so he would try to go into his normal spiel, which of course opens with a false premise, and then he builds a whole bunch of bullshit on top of the false premise, and I just cut out the false premise. I was able to jump in right then. I don't have to wait for his 20-minute allotment of time. I can just cut out each lie as they happen. And Hovind can't handle that because everything he says is lies. So that's why he needs a debate strategy where he gets an uninterrupted 20 minutes so that he can tell as many lies as possible. I've actually seen that guy tell 21 lies in a 19-word sentence.
Yeah, I think that's something that people don't get. Maybe when they're maybe you're like, oh, I'm an atheist. Let me hear a Christian debate an atheist. And you'll see the Christian win because of the debate format. It doesn't necessarily mean the person's made their point. It's just they know how to debate. And it does seem like they have like their magic spells, and you have to do your counters and then try to get what you want in. And that's got to be hard to do. But you have experience. You've done this before. You know what to do, right?
Yeah, this is why the creationists always want a live debate, because they can't win a written debate. It can't be done. They will fail every time. Because on stage, when he brings up some citation that he doesn't even tell where he's getting the citation, he just names some factoid he may have just made up on the spot, pulled out of his ass, or misread from something we don't know, and he throws it out. How do you say you don't know what he's talking about, therefore he's lying? You can't. Right? You can't say that somebody's lying unless you can show on the spot. If you're a man of honor, at least you'll have this rule. You can't call someone a liar unless you can show on the spot that he knew what he was saying was wrong, and how you knew that he knew it was wrong when he said it. You don't have that ability in a live debate where you're both standing on stage. So the creationist has the ability of lying a whole bunch of times and showing how they don't understand anything about anything. So you not only have to correct everything that they just said that was wrong, but then also educate the audience in what is right at the same time as uneducating them, or you don't have the time to do that in a live presentation. But when it's a written debate, and this is the way science works. When you post something online, you have a written debate somewhere, you can make all the ridiculous arguments you want to. And the scientists, or the scientific community rather, will respond to show every hole and every error. They will look up every citation. And if you say, well, they found that snails carbon dated to 30,000 years old and it was still alive, you don't get to just say that, because the scientists will say, what is your citation? And then, and I experienced this myself. I was in a online discussion, which was called a debate, with Pastor Bob Enyart of Denver Bible Church. And I challenged him online to come into a written debate to follow up that. And I was amazed that he actually accepted that challenge, and he did it. But he came into the written debate, and this, you can read this on the leagueofreason.co.uk. Me and Pastor Bob Enyart had this discussion. He cited a half a dozen different peer-reviewed articles, and then he said what each one of these said in support of his argument. Well, the thing is, we read those articles, so I don't have to respond right now, this minute. It's not my 20 minutes to follow his. I can respond in a few days if I want to. So now I can read all of the articles that he's just cited. And I realize that in every case, never once did the article say what he said it did. Not one time. So he either didn't read it, had somebody else tell him what it says, that he doesn't know what it says, or he misunderstood what it said. So I went through what each article actually did say and how it refuted everything in his argument, all of it. So you cannot defend creationism honestly. There is not a fact that will support you. If we have a chance to look at your data, we will show that your data supports me, and you're done. And that's all. And that's the only way to do this. And there's no other option. You just lose all the time, every time.
Well, did you know going in that pretty much the creationist arguments were full of shit when you started out, or did it take some time to
It took some time. When I started this, let's say just before Y2K, let's say somewhere in late 1990s, I thought naively that everybody believes what they do for a reason. And that if you ask me what reason I believe this or that, I would give you the data that indicates that conclusion. And you would say, oh, I can see why you would believe that. Yes. And if I ask you why you believe whatever you do, you should be able to give me the reason that indicates that. And then I would have to consider, yes, I see what's it. And maybe I was thinking at that time that I might be able to find something wrong with it. Because if I don't believe what they believe, then what is the reason they believe it? Maybe it'll convince me, maybe it won't. I didn't have to go into this foray very long or very many times with very many people before I realized that, no, these people are just telling me that they're telling me over and over again that they believe on faith. They have no reason. They believe because they want to believe, because they believe in belief, because they have to believe. And if they don't believe, they're going to go to hell. Well, that means you already believe. Or else, if you didn't believe, you wouldn't believe that there was a hell, so there wouldn't be any risk. So what the hell's the problem? But we're talking about people who don't believe because of rational reasons. They're not being rational. Creationism isn't just religion, it's a form of religious extremism which requires a degree of reality denial. You have to deny not only that evolution is a real thing which can be demonstrated, and it can be, but then you have to adhere to a whole bunch of lies from creationists that we can prove are all false, and that the people making these claims are all false. And you have to buy into this collection of dogma and doctrines for whatever. It's like Ken Ham of Answers in Genesis said, if you want to believe in salvation, which is the second half of the Bible, you have to believe in creation, which is the first half of the Bible. So make yourself believe. Now, he calls it, he doesn't call it confirmation bias, which is what everybody else would know it as. He calls it God glasses, where you read the Bible and simply throw out all the evidence. You just believe the Bible regardless, no matter how ridiculous it is.
Yeah, I almost wonder why there isn't more transparency. Like the current situation with the Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh. Why don't people just say, we don't care what his history is and if he lied. We just want this guy in the office because he's going to do what we want him to do.
Yeah, we just want a dictatorship.
Just be open about it, because we're pretty. It seems like we're getting close, but then people are like, no, we got to kind of lie, and we can't just say that.
Because they haven't completely overturned our secular government yet. So they need to get this last linchpin in there to keep their president, their dictator, from getting overturned. So they'll have somebody in the Supreme Court who says that a president can't be indicted, even though we know now that he will be, unless he has somebody to pardon him, right? And as I just point out to somebody arguing Republican politics with me today, I'm like, she was telling me that the Democrats are the ones that are causing all the harm to the country. And I can go back over the last 10 years, and I can say every fucked up thing that happened to this country was always only ever done by Republicans. Every asinine policy that is only about bigotry, or that does the exact opposite of everything we want to achieve, we don't have to wonder, if it was written by a Republican. If it was fucking stupid and had nothing to do with nothing to do with anything but bigotry and forbidding trans people for being able to pee, or some other petty thing against other colored people or whatever it is. We already know it was a Republican that wrote it. It's always that way. And this has been the last 10 years. I'm just somebody canvassing for that on my front doorstep the other day. And I said, name me a Republican policy since Reagan that you could defend. You know, I mean, and I didn't mean to get into politics, but you know what? It's inevitable at this point.
Well, I mean, why not? I mean, I did listen to you talk on
the issue of creationism is not a religious issue.
Yeah.
It's not a scientific issue. It is a political issue. It was part of the wedge strategy, which is by the Discovery Institute. They came up with this idea that you cause a general distrust of science across the country. And this was going to cause people who don't understand science, because it's been so misrepresented, that they will start seeking religious answers instead. And then you position all your religious judges and senators and so forth, so that when you finally have your Kitzmiller versus Dover trial, you would have a Republican conservative Christian appointed judge there to rule in your favor. And all of that went down exactly according to plan, except that the Republican conservative Christian appointed judge was still a good judge and realized that everybody arguing for intelligent design was lying. And he didn't like that people were lying to misrepresent his religion.
Yeah, if only there would be a few more of those out there. It's kind of like Bob Mueller. He's actually a Republican, but yeah, we're depending on them. Yeah. But you're in Texas.
Yeah, and I just want to stress that this is not a blanket statement that if you're Republican, you're evil. I mean, like John E. Jones is Republican.
There's that context.
Bob Mueller is Republican. Arnold fucking Schwarzenegger, who's one of the most outspoken anti-Trump activists, is a Republican. So just because you're a Republican doesn't mean you're stupid. It just means you're surrounded by stupid.
Well, we can maybe sidestep politics and maybe sidestep creationism for a second.
Yeah,
becoming a full-time activist. I mean, you kind of got started with the Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism. You did YouTube videos,
I didn't get into why I started that.
I know.
Sorry, I distracted myself. I mean, what was I realized was happening is that the churches were spreading out the chick tracts, and of course they're doing their church meetings at least twice a week, not just on Sundays, but they were also doing Wednesdays as well. And then they'll do all these other community functions, and then they keep handing out DVDs and books and tracts and VHS tapes back when they had those, all of these things, everything they could by any means they could to lie to as many people as they could to keep those people handing over their tithe. And I realized that the only way that you're really going to understand evolution is if you're smart enough, and two, you have the means to go and take advanced courses, and then they have to be in specific subjects, and then you have to suffer through a lot of irrelevant stuff even in those specific subjects. You can take paleontology and geology and all like this, and very often miss a lot of the important or key information that deals in the subject. So I thought I would create a handful of short attention span videos, and as I said, when I was posted in creation forums or Christian forums, I posted that there were these foundational falsehoods of creationism, and I listed what they were. And as soon as I posted that, the moderators of that website deleted them. They didn't want people to know about the foundational falsehoods of creationism. So I said, okay, well, what I got to do then is I got to make a video. And I started to make a video to explain what those, dozen or 15 foundational falsehoods were, and then I realized that I can't squeeze all of this into a 10-minute limit, which was imposed by YouTube at that time. So I started out by doing, I had each foundational falsehood was its own episode until I got to a couple of them that was so much information I couldn't squeeze it into 10 minutes, and so two of them had to be two-parters. I think they're the last two episodes had to be two-parters, both of them. The last one being the one that was the most irritating to me, where evolution is just a theory, not a fact. That's the one that bothers me the most, because that's the one that when you hear that, you know that the person telling you this knows that they are lying. Because you can tell them what a scientific theory is. You can tell them what the criteria is and how it really works. They will never concede their error on this point. They will always use a misrepresentation that they now know is a misrepresentation. You can show every documentation from every educational academic source to prove that you are right. They will never admit it because my holy book. I don't know what the lame-ass excuse is, but what I've constantly heard over and over and over and over again is these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this, and why can't I believe what I want to believe, and why does it have to be true before I believe it, and I'm going to believe whatever I want. You will never change my mind. You and your facts. And why would I want to believe this? I want to believe something. It doesn't matter what you want to believe. But again, we're talking about people who have no rational understanding. They've never taken a logic class, and I've never taken a logic class either, but it's because I don't need to. I've actually listened to a number of tutorials on logic, and these were all like first grade learning materials. It's like when you take computer science in community college and they say this is a mouse. There's there's a basic level of learning. I don't need that, but there's a whole lot of other people who do definitely need that. To know what a mouse is and know how to click with it.
Now you got a certain look to you, and it gives people a belief that you could be the dark one. So when a Christian called you a demon, what was your response?
I've been hearing that kind of thing my whole life. I mean, I was always judged on my appearance. I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I grew up in the golden age of heavy metal. And if you had a Harley, it meant you had a criminal record. Likewise, if you had a Harley and tattoos and long hair, well, that meant you're scary and dangerous. Not so much now, but when I was growing up, everybody thought that way. You didn't have Malcolm Forbes riding a Harley back in those days. If you had a Harley, then you were part of a criminal element. You had a felony history. That's just what everybody assumed. I remember walking down the mall with a black leather jacket on, and the crowd parts because they all think I'm some kind of weird gang member. It's the stupid stereotypes that people have, and they can't, for whatever reason, see past them. And I get criticism all the time from people who've never been able, I guess, to express who they really are, complaining about who I really am. Well, fuck y'all. I mean, it's not my problem you're so repressed.
Well, I recall the line where someone said you were a demon. You said, well, no, demons are naked. I'm wearing clothes. So that was the difference.
I don't remember saying that. I don't know how I would respond to that line right now, but I don't remember using that response. I remember saying that there are no such things as devils, and then they tell me that the greatest lie the devil ever told was making people believe he doesn't exist. And I'm like, well, you know what, the only truth there is whatever you can show to be true. And if you can't show that what you're saying is true, it's not. Because one thing I've noticed about believers, they hate the burden of proof more than vampires hate garlic.
Yeah, show your work. Not so good. Or just point to the Bible and not actually look.
I had a conversation with some guy yesterday who was insisting that he was not a creationist, but he was arguing against evolution. And over and over and over again, I would show him wrong about some point. He would just desperately try to change the subject to something else so that he wouldn't have to admit defeat on this other point. I'm like, why are you even doing this? You're wrong. We're gonna end off this call. You're gonna know you're wrong. You have to sleep tonight knowing you're wrong. Why not fix that and not be wrong anymore? Wouldn't that be better?
Well, I personally know I'm wrong by saying that this would only be a 45-minute interview because it's impossible to cut you down to that. But I do want to make this something that's more bite-sized. And of course, we can always have you back on. There's going to be a sequel to the book, I'm sure, and other events going on. So I believe you are attending a somewhat local event coming up pretty soon. What's happening?
Oh, I went to Austin recently to go testify before the Texas State Board of Education, and that was a frustrating thing because there was a number of academic experts. There was Jewish and Christian PhD professors, scholars, telling the Board of Education not only that there is absolutely no evidence that the founding fathers were looking to Moses or thinking about Moses when they drafted the Ten Commandments, and so it would be dishonest to say that the founders were basing their, if you have no evidence of a thing, then you can't say that that's the thing, right? You certainly can't teach it. That would be lying to students. But on top of not having any evidence to back that position, these scholars were saying that there is substantial evidence against that position from each of the founding fathers, making these statements about how we needed a secular state and how we needed to not allow Christians to have power, and how that, and like John Adams specifically saying that we did not base our Constitution on the Ten Commandments and all that. But, you know, the Board of Education wants to believe what they want to believe, and they want to teach what they want other children to believe. And it's okay to lie as long as you're lying for Jesus. So they voted not for reason, but for religion, so that they can lie to students. Seriously, that just happened last week. And I wrote a blog post about it, and it was all over the news. I even saw a link from French news. You know, there's a French news site that was commenting about it, how we replaced the actual references to the actual inspirations for the founding fathers and replaced them with Moses, because that's how ridiculous a cartoon this place has come. But anyway, while I was down there in Austin to do this testimony, I found out they were doing the bat cruise, which, you know, they have millions and millions of bats that live in the Congress Street Bridge, and you know, at dusk, especially in October and September, you get the best display of their flying out. And so they do this bat cruise every year, and it's kind of like a celebrity event in many cases. And there's tickets on this like paddle wheel boat, this huge 2-story paddle wheel boat that goes out on the river, and you see the bats and everything. And they all have the drinks and everything. Is quite the cocktail party on this boat. But I realized that a lot of the people in the atheist community of Austin didn't have their tickets. And indeed, I didn't have my tickets either. But I said, but you know what? We should go anyway, because right next to where that boat takes off, you can rent kayaks. And we'll just go ahead and rent all the kayaks and go paddle alongside the boat. And I thought it was being silly. But everybody thought, hey, that's a great idea. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, you know what? I like renting the kayaks. I do. I like taking those kayaks out on that little river. And that would be a good time. And then, of course, there's going to be a big party afterwards and everything. So that's where we're going to be going this weekend.
So have your paddle in one hand, your stout in the other hand. I feel like the reflective, you know, vest would go very well with your black outfit. I think it'd be a nice counterpoint.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
So before we call it a night, now I forgot to ask, because I always forget to ask, but you do so many shows, I figure you probably have something here. So do you have a joke to share with the audience?
A joke? No, that was something I hadn't considered. I have a lot on my plate right now. I'm preparing a presentation for the Tetrapod Zoology Conference in London. That will be my next gig, where I am going to be unveiling the Phylogeny Explorer project, which is something we've been working on since at least 2011. And it's a online phylogeny in an encyclopedic form where you can wander through the entire tree of life. And we're going to be involving the scientific community in that at what we're calling TetZooCon. And I'm very much looking forward to that. That's in the first week or so of October, and I'm like trying to concentrate everything on that after we've blown up this mistake in Austin.
Well, and if you don't have any other upcoming events, just let everybody know where they can find you online and how they can support an actual atheist activist who has a very strong liver, by the way.
I am a full-time activist. I left a corporate job after 14 years. I got into in Patreon because the job had changed parameters so much that it was no longer possible for me to do anything as far as my activism anymore. And that had gotten to be a lot more important to me than that office job. So fortunately, Patreon was a way that we could move from one to the other. And so if you want to support my work, and please do, I need all the help I can get, really. That is patreon.com/ARONRA. And I don't know what else to say about that except that, my name is ARONRA, pronounced Aron Ra. And my videos are all over the place, and I do debates, I do public appearances, and that sort of thing. And I don't know how else to sell myself. I'll just let it go. Let you do it.
Well, I feel like the name sells itself. I do want to say my favorite debate you ever did was the time you debated Rachel, and she was drunk, and you were taking the creationist side. I know it was a joke, but it was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much.
And she was flustered, but I think you've heard so many of them. Yeah, you kind of know how to answer all the questions.
Just be as dishonest as you can be. That's how you play the creationist game.
Sounds about right. Well, thank you, Aron, for being on the show. It was a lot of fun, and it's my fault for cutting this relatively short, but I think that just makes people want more, and there'll be all kinds of links in the show notes so you can check Aron out, all of his greatest hits.
Thank you very much.